How you doing, everybody? John Arezzi here. It's great to see everybody, or look at the growing number of people that are joining us right now from all of our streams. We're streaming live, not just on Facebook, on the three social media platforms that I have there. We're also streaming live on my YouTube channel, and we are very excited to be here. And we're streaming live on Twitter. So this is the night that we're going to make the announcement that hopefully so many of you have been waiting for. Pro Wrestling Spotlight, the podcast, Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, left the airways. Really, on July the 4th was the last show that was distributed by the Arcadian Vanguard Network. And of course, the reasons for me leaving that platform were based on a decision Brian Last made, and I respect that decision. Everybody knows what happened. He was not really enamored with the gentleman that I was talking to, and everybody knows that was Conrad Thompson, about doing some opportunities that were outside Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now. But I'm not going to say anything negative here, because I do appreciate everything that Brian did when he launched Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now. And I'm seeing so many people here logging on. Thank you, everyone, for the kind comments so far. So, with Brian, Arcadian Vanguard was a great place to do a show for 2 years. I enjoyed it very much. I loved working with Jason Nacarado, who had such a passion for the show, and Lou Kippelman. It was a great pleasure for me to be there. So now we move on, we move forward, and believe me, it's been it hasn't been the easiest thing in the world to get this show back on, but we are going to do that. We talked to a lot of people. And to be frank, on the Conrad discussions, just to kind of give everybody an update on that stuff, those conversations regarding the things that I was talking to him about doing have kind of really cooled off since the public, mentions of what was going on behind the scenes. But that's life. That's the wrestling business. I respect Conrad Thompson. I think he's built an incredibly large network of great shows. And I think Brian Last does a wonderful job with the Jim Cornette Experience and the Drive-Thru. And, I love Jimmy Cornette. I always have, always will. And I respect Brian Last as somebody who is a real, true historian of wrestling. And I have nothing but kind things to say to Brian and to his team, who I'm going to miss working with. But you move on. Things happen for a reason. Everything in life happens for a reason. And the one thing I'll address that what Brian said about me is that I throw a lot of Hail Mary passes. A Hail Mary pass is when you throw a ball down the field, and you certainly hope, beyond hope, that someone's going to catch it and run it in for a touchdown. And a lot of times those Hail Mary passes end up being intercepted, or they are not caught by the receiver. All my life, I guess I've been a Hail Mary thrower. I don't think I would have gotten a book deal with ECW Press if I wasn't, reaching out to Michael Holmes and, Hail Marying a pitch, and I got a book deal. It was the same thing about starting this program 30 something years ago now, 32 years ago on WNYG, doing Weekend of Champions, helping bring Lucha Libre into the United States in 1993, and everything else I've done outside of the pro wrestling business. I'm a entrepreneur. I have been most happy in my life doing entrepreneurial things. I worked in the corporate world in the music business for many years, and even though I enjoyed it, it was initially owned by a private owner. Once a corporation came in and bought it, it became less enjoyable for me, so I had to move on. So that's the way I live my life. I live my life on the edge a lot of times, and everybody knows me, and who's here watching this thing. So anyway, I'm excited about the future. And we are about to introduce some members of the team that will be working hand in hand with the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, and that will be the name. It's simply going to be called the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. And it's going to be formatted differently than the previous show that ran on Arcadian Vanguard. And, those shows that Brian did are still up there at pwspod.com. I mean, so if you want to compare, or if you want to, go back and listen to them, they're still very entertaining, and I recommend you do that. And I'm not going to ask Brian to take them down. That's up to him. I'd love for them to stay up there. And there's still a number of YouTube clips on Arcadian Vanguard's channel. So yeah, he's welcome to keep them up there. I have no problem about that at all. But first and foremost, I want to introduce to you the producer of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. And it's somebody that you guys will be familiar with, because this person has been with me on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight live shows when we started them during the pandemic. And then, of course, we cut them back. And so anyway, I want to bring on Alex Robertson from Toronto, Canada. Are you in Toronto, or where are you? Montreal,
Close.
Toronto, where are you?
Close. I'm in Montreal.
You're in Montreal. So, Alex, I am so happy that you're going to be a part of this show. And we've already been in production, but welcome as producer and editor of Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast.
Thank you. Honestly, it's an honor for me, like we've talked about before, just going through all of your old shows and listening to these amazing interviews, and some of the content that I know is coming in these future episodes that everyone's going to get to hear. I mean, I can't wait for everyone to hear it. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we're excited, and your diligence and your work ethic and your speed of production on the editing side of it just blows me away, because for all of our patrons that are out there, and I do uploads every Sunday. I mean, I send Alex the tapes to edit them, and no sooner than I put them in the folder, an hour or two later, I get a little email, they're done. And it's been the same today with just some tweaks that we're doing for episode number 1. And because I want to give that podcast, before we drop it nationally, I want to give it to the patrons first. And now we're going to be able to do that and release that on Sunday, which is really cool for the patrons. And there's so many of the patrons that are here right now. So thank you for all the hard work. And I really look forward to going on this journey with you. And it'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been so much fun for me to go back and edit these, and not just for content purposes, but also because it used to be part of my everyday job that I do for a living. So, and that kind of was taken away from me when I changed roles at work. So to be able to go back and do these things, it's really quite fun for me too.
Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about your background in broadcasting.
Of course. So I'm a content producer for a news talk show here in Montreal. So basically, like, what I do on a day-to-day basis is book guests, and I produce content for the show. I'm the one that comes up with a lot of the ideas, and anything that my host wants in terms of guests for the show, or stories, or whatever it is, I'm there to do it, right? And I work alongside a technical producer who does all of the audio for the show. So that's what I've been doing lately. But I've worked in various different roles at that station. I've been a reporter. Like I said, I've been a technical producer. I've also worked on the sports side. We have a sister station where we work here, TSN. If anybody from Canada is familiar, you'd probably think of the TV station. You'd be right. It's just on the radio side that I got to work over there. And I was also a producer over there who did, many different things, as well as, talk on the air. So really the only thing that I haven't done is be a host myself, where I work. So it's been quite a ride, but this is just one more thing that I get to add to my broadcast career. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We got so many great moments of history to cover with the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. And speaking of history, I'm going to introduce our co-host that, it was a long, painstakingly a painstakingly process for me to try to find the right individual to carry on with the show. And because to be frank and honest with everybody, there are not very many people that were around back in the day when I was doing this program. And so, I mean, that was a hard thing, just talking to some folks. But I kept coming back to one guy. And this individual was a frequent guest on Pro Wrestling Spotlight when we were on terrestrial radio 30 plus years ago. He also has an incredible background in history on pro wrestling. He was involved with so many different magazines back in the day. The gentleman I'm about to introduce is a former managing editor for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, and all the other magazines during the Aftermag's glory years of London publishing. He then went on to become the former executive editor for WCW magazine, contributing editor to magazines like WOW and Wrestling's Main Event. And he was the first host for the debut version of ECW, then Eastern Championship Wrestling, when it made its debut on Channel 7 in Philadelphia with Todd Gordon. And he was a very frequent guest on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight years and years ago. He's a true historian. And he was also the guy that for the first two annuals, the PWA 500, which everybody loves and reveres, he's the guy that wrote it, at least the first two by himself. And then, he contributed, of course. I'm going to introduce the new co-host of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, Mr. Bob Smith. Bob, how are you?
Happy to be here. Great to be with both of you. This is going to, folks, this is going to be a blast. I don't know if anybody remembers me out there, but we're really going to have some great shows coming up. And I couldn't be happy to be part of all this.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been in production and they're getting questions. When is the first one available for patrons? This Sunday, yes. 6 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, Sunday night. The first Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast will be available for patrons. And then we're just about so close with the national distribution, which we hope to have out and ready. All you got to do is search Pro Wrestling Spotlight or John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight on any of your platforms, and you'll be able to pick it up, whether it's Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Rock from Lindenhurst, one of our old callers, is just said, I thought it was going to be Vince Russo. No. There was a lot of speculation on who it was going to be.
I was shocked. I saw all these names being bandied about, and I'm like, well, I'm just here to disappoint everybody at this point. But I hope that I see a couple people remember me, which is kind of cool. So thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's Bob, you added so much to the show years ago. But here's the thing that we talked about privately and we'll talk about publicly is that back in the day when you appeared on Pro Wrestling Spotlight so many times, you were under kind of a gag order and you couldn't really disclose because those magazines were mostly kayfabe. And you had to be careful of what you said because you knew a lot of stuff that was going on. And that's another reason why I think this is going to be cool for everybody is because you have inside information that you were never able to talk about on some of those events that happened all those years ago.
Yeah, as we all know, pro wrestling is a political animal. And when you're working along with the various promotions, there were things you could say and there was a lot you couldn't say. And I was privy to news that was about to happen, but I couldn't say anything about it when I was a guest on your show because I would be letting the cat out of the bag. You had your own problems with, you're revealing the finishes and all those type of things, you know? So we always had to walk a tightrope. And I was warned about it. Like, I remember Stu Sachs was the publisher. He said, if you're going on John's show, you better be careful with what you say. You can do this, but you can't do that. And I was like, okay. And that's all I could do. So for the first time, you're really going to get to know me because I can say what I want now, and I really couldn't say everything that I knew back then. So I think we're going to reveal some really interesting things in the next few episodes. In fact, we already have. We've worked on a couple, and we've got some real surprises for you guys. I think you're going to have some fun here.
Yeah, I do too. And I'm just going to give everybody kind of a rundown on where we are and what our vision is. If you're expecting Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, the exact format, that's not what this show is going to be. First and foremost, one of the biggest changes, we're going to have guests. And we've already booked some pretty cool guests. So we're going to bring on some of those people that are still with us that could reminisce about their appearances on Pro Wrestling Spotlight or add a little bit of historical background to what was going on back in the day. So if you're familiar with the show, and I think most, if not everybody on here is, the amount of guests that we had and what those names were. So we're going to book these guests. And there is going to be a place for Donnie Leibel as well. I mean, Donnie was our guy with the news capsule each and every week and gave us the news. So I'm toying with a concept for Donnie that's going to be a look back at the news from 30 years ago, and he's excited to be involved. So it's going to be reminiscent of what I did 30 years ago. Let's put it that way. When Pro Wrestling Spotlight was on the air, we're going to have interviews. We're going to have the clips. We're going to review what went on the show 30 years ago, like the previous podcast did, but there'll be a lot of new elements that we'll be introducing. But the biggest vision that I had for all of this was I always wanted to release the show the same week as the show from 30 years ago. And with the recording schedule and Brian's obligations, we were never able to catch up like that. But now we're going to, and I'll explain to you how we're going to do that. The first show that's dropping this Sunday for patrons and then distributed internationally, I should say, by the end of the week, is going to be a focus on the Weekend of Champions convention of 1991. And that will feature interviews that we did back in the day with Buddy Rogers, Lou Thez, and we also have a significant interview with Ric Flair from the time. And we have a special guest that we'll be bringing on, somebody that was at that Weekend of Champions convention, someone that I was instrumental in their life, and someone who actually shot the photograph of Buddy Rogers with Bruno Sammartino. And we'll bring him on the first show, which has already been taped and edited, ready to go. And then for the show that we are going to air on October the 29th, which is 2 weeks from today, it'll follow the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Vice TV, where it's focus, and I'm a guest. I appear on that show on October the 28th on the steroid scandals, the Dr. George Saharian trial, and leading into the trial against Vince McMahon. So show number 2 will be our steroid scandal extravaganza. There's a lot of audio there. But we have a special guest for that particular show as well, and it's going to be the co-creator for Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Husney, who will talk about what people saw the night before, which is October 28th. So we'll drop that October 29th, and patrons will get it a week from Sunday. So we'll always keep patrons 5 days ahead, 6 days ahead of the actual podcast. And then we're going to go really to the next show, which is going to drop on November the 5th. And that's going to be coverage of Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio shows from September of 1991. So we'll do another condensed September run with some of the great guests, Cactus Jack, all the guests that it's going to be lively and fun. And then the following show will cover October, and then the following show will cover most of November in 1991. And then around Thanksgiving weekend, November 26th is the day, we will feature coverage of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight from November 24th, 1991. We'll be caught up, and each and every week after that, the show will be actually 30 years to the week of that Pro Wrestling Spotlight show. And just to let everybody know, we have 3 years left of programming, And we're also going to do some bonus episodes. I started another show, which really is a look back at the history of Madison Square Garden wrestling. I went to every single Madison Square Garden show from August 30th, 1971, right through 1977. So on a monthly basis, in conjunction with the Madison Square Garden show from 50 years ago, I am doing a show with Tim Puttrey, who's a executive for Spotify, and he does a great podcast on the Olympics. And it's written by Richie Garcia, who was one of the fans from years ago who helped me out at the conventions. And Bob and Richie met at the conventions, and they became lifelong friends. And they came to me with this idea: you went to all those garden shows, people would love to hear about them. Why don't you talk about them? And I was like, yeah, I started as a fan. I was 14 years old, then started Blassie's fan club, then segued into a ringside photographer. And so we're going to cover the Madison Square Garden era from 50 years ago. And those will be bonus episodes that we use here at Pro Wrestling Spotlight Podcast. So we have some cool things to look forward to.
We really do. And I gotta tell everybody that's listening right now, show number 2, I am particularly happy with. I think it's prescient. I think it's the original Pro Wrestling Spotlight really broke the news about the entire scandal that was going on back in 1991. And it did it repeatedly over the course of about a month. I mean, so much was going on. So many people were involved. And, from our offices at PWI, I just remember that everybody was kind of scared about what was about to happen. We really didn't know how this was going to go. And I'm sure it was the same with you, John. As people who love the wrestling business, to see it besmirched the way it was, publicly by people who really didn't know the wrestling business, it was a hard time. It really was. But it's a big piece of history, and I think you covered it about as well as anybody could have at that time.
It was very stressful. And then, of course, even the aftermath, when the press conference took place at the Plaza Hotel, and I had to get in there under an assumed name and then confront Vince McMahon and Steve Planamenta from the WWF. We have all of that audio, and that's going to be an interesting thing. Patrons already can hear it. I mean, I've already uploaded some of it to our Patreon account. But when you hear it, it's going to be really interesting for everybody to take a listen to what happened back then, which really kind of led into that whole Hogan on Arsenio, and then Billy Graham and Dr. D. David Schultz, who come on my show in January of '92 to say that they allegedly shot Hogan up hundreds of times with steroids. And then the following week is when the sex scandal started to break. I mean, all of this is ahead for us. So if you're a student of history, I don't think there's a better place to learn what happened in that time period. The 90s were an interesting time before the Attitude Era. You'll hear it all here.
Marty Greenfield, is that the same Bob Smith who used to host Howdy Doody? If it is, he's aged really well.
Oh my goodness, you have aged so well.
I wouldn't agree with that. I thought the original Buffalo Bob Smith was quite the dapper dresser.
I never put 2 and 2 together, Bob.
You never thought of it that way?
No, I used to watch Howdy Doody when I was a kid.
I'm not. Oh, you're a little older than I am. It was a little bit before my time, but I've been hearing Buffalo Bob my whole life.
Wow. Yeah, Clarabelle was
older
the clown.
guys.
Yeah,
Clarabelle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. You guys are
Alex, I'm sure this is very foreign to you.
Oh, yeah. Nobody in decades has even brought up Howdy Doody. So thank you, Marty Greenfield.
Yeah, Marty, great. Comment of the day so far. Looking at the comments, they're all coming in. I mean, I'd like to say hello to Jeremy Priest, who is actually one of our patrons. He's the executive producer level patron. So, Jeremy, thank you for your unwavering support. And Dan Brown, it's good to have you here. Maddie Montclair, Rick Newsom from the UK, Nick Tardo, Nick from Massapequa, who called into the show many, many times, and other, Resi's Pure Class. Thank you. I mean, there's no reason to be bitter about anything, man. Life throws you curveballs, and you change direction sometimes when it's least expected, but you pick yourself up and you got to move forward if you enjoy what you're doing. And I love sharing this history. I think it's important for everyone to have a understanding of it and to be able to listen to it as it happened back in the day.
But this is why I'm glad I never lost track of the wrestling business, because when I left PWI, my phone always rang. Colin Bowman calls, says, "You want to work for WCW magazine?" I said, "Sure." And they did that for on and off for 2 or 3 years. Then Sandy Krebs calls and said, "You want to write for me?" Yeah. And Bill Apter calls and said, "You want to write for me at WOW?" And I said, "Yes." And, it just kept going and going and going. Every time I got out, they pulled me back in. Yeah. And now, 25 years later, this is the first call I've had. And I feel 25 years younger because it's great to be back, particularly talking about the era when I worked in professional wrestling. So I'm about as excited as I can be. I really, really am.
I am too. A Facebook user who's anonymous says Bob Smith is always interesting to listen to. Besides his vast wrestling knowledge, Bob speaks as if he is your friend.
Very true.
I think we're friends, right?
Yeah.
I think we've been friends for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, you know what I really enjoyed back when I was in wrestling? I enjoyed the fans on the Magic Bus, the fans at ringside at the the Eastern Championship Wrestling shows.
Were you on the Magic Bus?
Yeah.
You were on that bus ride?
Yeah, one of them, yeah.
Yeah, that was the crazy bus ride because we rented this bus from this hippie company. It was like it was almost like a Partridge Family bus.
Yep. Yeah, I was on the Magic Bus, and I had Al Bello with me, who now works for Getty Images, one of the great sports photographers. You see his work all over.
I remember him.
And when we got home, Al says, "Don't bring me back another one of these things, will you?" Because we were surrounded by real fans, and they had videos going, and it was an innovative bus for its day, as you recall. I mean, you had music playing and people walking up. Bob, who's winning the match next week, and it was wild. It was pretty cool.
Well, I mean, we had guys like Fred the Elephant Boy from Howard Stern and his brother. I mean, and Mick Foley used to come on the bus with us all the time to ride to. And actually, the bus trip that we did to the Great American Bash in '91, I think, was when he got together then with Dusty Rhodes, and he got rehired to go back into WCW because he came on our bus. He went backstage, and that was it. He got hired. So. All this stuff is really cool to reminisce about, and for me, every time I put a new show, I listen to one of the new show from 30 years ago. It really opens up this memory for me, and because it's the first time I've heard these shows in 30 years, and it's a lot of fun. It really is. And I'm sure Bob and even Alex, I mean, because you're just starting now this journey with us about listening to the history. I think you're going to be, I think it's good. I think you're going to have fun with it as well, Alex, because of some of the crazy things that happen. I mean, because there's all kinds of crazy shit that happens pretty damn soon on this program.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was thinking about it the other day. I obviously I still watch wrestling whenever I can, but I started to notice, recently that it's not the same as it used to be. Like I got a taste of what it was when, you guys were covering it and watching it way before I was even born. And then I watch what we have as a product today, and it's so vastly different. And, sometimes it doesn't even compare. And I would rather watch and listen to matches that happened in the 70s, in the 80s, even the 90s when I was still in diapers. So it's fun for me. It's fun for me to have to go back and listen to all of these, these cool interviews that you did. And even with the episode that we're talking about with the steroids, like, it's so interesting to me. And then watching Dark Side of the Ring on top of that, where those are also stories that happened when I wasn't watching wrestling at the time. So I'm comparing and contrasting everything that I'm seeing, and it's very insightful. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, you're gonna have fun with it. And
you know what I'm really excited about this project is because we cannot let the heritage die.
No,
I want people to remember the Buddy Rogers, this Bruno Sammartinos, all of these people, because these are the people that laid the foundation for what we watch today. And as the years go by, their names are mentioned less and less, and it bothers me. Fred Blassie's another one.
Mhm.
There's so many people that laid the groundwork for what the sport is now. And I think we're doing a service in that I want to just talk about these legends because they're not talked about enough now. And as the format of professional wrestling changes, the way it's presented changes, their legacies tend to get buried. I don't want that to happen anymore. I want their names to be at the forefront forever when it comes to professional wrestling, and I hope this show has a little piece of that.
Yeah, it's the history is amazing, especially the guests that were on the show, and when people get a chance to hear the first episode, and you hear that long interview with Buddy Rogers,
Mhm.
and
Oh man,
him taking phone calls, and he says a lot of insightful things, and his opinions of Ric Flair and that history, and then the backstories on how they were so close at the Weekend of Champions. I mean, that's all in the first episode that is going to drop for patrons on Sunday and then be released nationally and internationally later in the week. So it's really cool stuff. I love that Buddy Rogers interview and the Lou Thez interview that was also included on there.
Lou Thez really surprised me listening to that again because he was getting on in years at that point, and he was so on top of the steroid issue and everything else that was going on in wrestling. I was shocked at his acumen at that point in his life. I really was.
Yeah. And of course, talking about Freddie Blassie.
Oh boy,
Freddie will be on the third episode.
Yep.
And that is for me, that was one of the highlights of the entire run of the show. And I was able to get Freddie Blassie, if you're going to listen to show number 2, when we were all invited, a handful of us, to Vince McMahon's office, to Titan Towers, and he wanted to cooperate. If we cooperate, it was kind of an interesting thing. I asked for Freddie Blassie, and I got him for September, and that was the last time I got anybody from the WWF. But just because I ran his fan club, because I revered Fred, and the opportunity to spend 2 hours with him on Pro Wrestling Spotlight from September 15th, 1991, was one of the highlights of the entire run of the show for me. Fred
Blassie, the man who scared the living bejesus out of me when I was about 13 years old, when he came back to the WWF around 73, and he was just off the charts vicious. I mean, I had never seen anything quite like it. And in my formative brain, I was like, "Oh my God, this is scary!" But I had to watch it every week to see what was going on. He was the standard that all heels had to follow, and nobody could ever follow him. No, there was nobody like Fred Blassie as a wrestler. Nobody, not even close.
No, he had that believability.
Yeah.
Not only as a heel, but as a babyface out in Los Angeles. He was revered out there. El Rubio, they used to call him. And here on the East Coast, they used to censor him by putting an X on the screen because he'd be biting people's heads open. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to relive again for everybody out there. And so many others. I mean, Eddie Gilbert has explosive stuff that's coming up, and Paulie Dangerously, and then the Russo stuff. And then we go to DVD and the sex scandals, and then my breakup with Russo. I mean, in reality, the era that we're in right now really starts to shift the focus of the show. Because in the beginning stages, we had the Power Twins and Sonny Blaze, and we were just finding our way, and we had some hilarity and all kinds of missteps. And then Ricky Steamboat came on in '89 and talked about his contract negotiations with WCW. NWA leaves them, and then Jim Herd comes on, and the show starts to shift a little bit. But it really wasn't until the steroid things took place that it really became this truly insider show, and it became a forum for the performers to come on after they leave the WWF or WCW to talk about the inside of the business. I mean, when we have the Ultimate Warrior on for an hour in the future after he leaves the WWF, I mean, it's really amazing stuff. And then the Lucha Libre era, and even some of the listeners, Mike Johnson, Mike from College Point back then, and calling every week, and Joel Gertner and the others, and the beloved George from Lindenhurst, Bob. I don't know.
I remember, sure.
Yeah. So I mean,
But
Yeah, we're gonna have
you
fun.
know, it's a tribute to you because in that era, wrestlers didn't really give a lot of truthful interviews. They were always in character. And you were really the first person that I know of, and I could be wrong, but you were the first person that I knew of that they'd come on your show and talk as if they were talking to a peer, and they were comfortable in that regard. And I got to give you credit because you really broke ground in that way. And when people hear these interviews, they'll hear it too.
Yeah, it wasn't easy sometimes. I mean, and you had to, walk a delicate line, and you never wanted to, disarm anyone. You wanted to make them feel comfortable when they spoke to you, because this is in with the history of the show. A lot of these guys never, as you said, would talk publicly on an insider basis to anyone.
Oh,
So,
no. One time, Nikita Koloff called me we were doing an article, and he called me, and he was in character, even the voice. And I was taken up. I didn't think it was him. He
yeah.
said, "Hi, this is Nikita Koloff," and I said, "Hi, I'm the Cookie Monster." And then I realized, it really was Nikita Koloff, and I went, "Oh shit!"
Oh,
But
that's
he was totally, back then. You have to realize that some of the guys were completely, closed to anything but kayfabe.
Yeah. Very, very true. But you also have the guys that came on, like the Captain Lou Albanos, and nothing. He only knew how to be in character.
Right. He was his own character. He wasn't acting. That was Lou Albano. That's right.
Yeah, that was him. That was him to a T. So we have all of that to look forward to, and and when we, do this on, there's things for us to talk about that are kind of events coming up. I mean, I've been planning Weekend of Champions 2022 next summer. 30 years in the making, so to speak. One time only, because doing these every year will kill me. So we're closing in on the venue, and we're closing in on the forum, the concept, and we want to do a 4-day event in August of 2022. And I think fans from around the world will attend that, because what I'm planning for it, and you'll hear updates each and every week on the podcast about the development, and then the announcements, and then how you could go to Weekend of Champions 2022. So I'm going to knock on wood, and hopefully it happens in the way I visualize it in my head.
We're all looking forward to that, of course. And I'll tell you, I'm so excited
to be there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Borders will be open by then. So absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, the borders are opening in November for people to drive through anyway.
That's right.
And Montreal to New York is, or New Jersey, or wherever we may do this. It's only 7 hours or so.
7 hours, yeah.
Yeah, you could hop in a car with Greg is coming from Toronto, so
yeah, a different route. Yeah.
But anyway, we want to see you there, because we're going to be doing shoot interviews and banquets and live matches and autographs. We're trying to zone in on who the headliners will be, and then so it's going to be fun to kind of plan that for 2022 and see where that develops. So that'll be here, and I do want to mention Patreon again. Because Patreon, as everyone says, I mean, it is for creators, and we're creating content. I mean, if you're a patron right now, there's over 100 posts up there. I mean, there are, depending on the level, you will, at $5 to get in the door, as they say, for $5 a month, you're going to get the entire archives of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Where I'm putting them up as fast as I can. So right now, I think we have over probably 70 shows up there, and each and every week you'll get the original uncut episode of the episode we're talking about. So you'll have that each and every week as a patron, and you'll also have the podcast early, and that's for $5 a month. And if you want bonus audio, if you want Zoom calls, if you want vintage magazines that I send out to the upper tier patrons, that's all available. Photo sets from my archives, Zoom calls with the patrons again. I mean, it's like there's so much there. There are 5 different levels. and the amount of content I've even put up shows that I did in college called Pro Wrestling Spotlight, where I started this thing with the Grand Wizard and so many others from back in the day. And I certainly was a different broadcaster back then. I didn't, I was a kid. I was 18 or whatever it was. But that's all on patreon.com/John Arezzi. I'd love for you to give it a chance. And it does help with the production of the show because Alex spends a lot of time doing what she's doing, and Bob is involved too. And I want to be able to compensate them for their work. So, and then we hope to get advertisers. And I think what we'll do is for patrons, there's always going to be a commercial-free version. I believe. But we have to bring those numbers up. Now, when I left Brian, when Brian told me to leave, we had well over close to 500, I believe over almost 500,000 downloads to Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now. So the audience was there. I think we were doing an average of 3,000 to 5,000 people a week. I didn't get, the full analytics, but I'll be able to get those analytics now with our new distributor. So I want to be able to bring it to the point where we can get some national advertisers on the show. But for now, please, I know you won't be disappointed if you go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. You will, as I'm calling this, relive the history. You'll be able to relive the history with the Patreon account and with the podcast each and every week.
This is so exciting. And I'll tell you what, the three of us that you see on your screen here, guys, we're in it to win it. We're really serious about this project. We're really working hard to try to bring you one of the best wrestling podcasts you'll hear anywhere. And I'm committed to it. And I really hope that you'll help us spread the word and get people involved, because it's this is going to be good. No fooling. This is going to be very good. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't going to be good.
Yeah.
To come back into wrestling, it had to be for a good reason. And this is the best reason I can think of.
Yeah. And one thing that Brian said, which is absolutely true, is that the Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now podcast was the show that they spent the most time on because of its nuances and the clips and the editing. So, Alex, has it been difficult for you to do this so far? Or has it been kind of easy?
I'll tell you one thing. To the latest episode that I've edited, it took me quite a bit of time. And when you listen to it, episode 2, you'll understand why. But you need to take the time to make something the best that you can make it. And I've listened to a variety of different podcasts, whether they're wrestling or non-wrestling. And I've heard some pretty bad ones, to be honest with you. And I know I'm biased, but I think ours is superior. And I don't think that when it comes to wrestling history, I don't think you're going to be able to find anything any better than what we've got for you. So, and even current stuff, like John mentioned, we're going to have guests on. We've already had guests on, and we're keeping it current too. And again, those aren't guests that I've seen anywhere. So this is really exclusive stuff for sure.
It is. And I know when you're talking about current wrestling, there's a lot of stuff going on right now with AEW. And of course, tonight is a big night. And Fox TV is covering baseball. So SmackDown is going to be on, I believe, Fox Sports 1.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And they're doing a supersize show. They overlap what AEW is doing tonight, I believe.
Oh, it's the old days all over again.
Yeah.
Clash of the Champions-ish. Right, because remember when the NWA scheduled Clash of Champions to go against the WWF pay-per-view back then. So that's the vibe I'm getting out of that.
Oh yeah. Just a quick before I get back into that. Will there be a new feed on Apple Podcasts? Yes, it'll be available on Apple Podcasts, of course. Dominic DiBiase, my nephew, is just said hello, wishing you the best, Unc. Hi to Alex and Bob as well. Dominic, I love you. I miss you. I can't wait to see you. And I have news. I might as well, I'm an open book here, Dominic, if you're watching too. I was scheduled to have surgery on Thursday of this upcoming week. I have a torn rotator cuff. And Dominic, I'm not going to have the surgery till January now. Because this old man is going to be qualifying for Medicare when you turn 65. And so I am waiting till I get on Medicare, and that's how I'm going to get the surgery done. It needs to be done because I'm in a lot of, I can't lift my arm very high. And, it's part of getting old. You tear things in your shoulder. And I think it stems from me throwing a baseball to Dominic during the pandemic outside when I was up in New York. I was throwing this baseball, and maybe that had something to do with it too. But but whatever. I am happy that I'm not having surgery next Thursday too. So,
but will you be able to
first of the year when I turn 65 in January?
Are you going to be able to deal with the pain until then?
I will do the best I can.
The show must go on, as they say.
The show must go on. Yeah,
he's a gamer. Nothing's keeping him out of the spotlight, so to speak.
No, because we were also. I'm not blaming you for the injury, Dom. Don't worry about it. Talk this weekend. Yes, love you. It's gonna be fun, and I'm happy that everybody here is along for the ride. I mean, I'm excited about this. We'll have fun with this. We'll laugh. We'll listen to the history. And I do want your input. I really do. I want the input of the patrons, especially because right now we reached 80 patrons, and that was without a podcast that was out every week. The number that I did with Brian was about 150, and that was after 2 years. So to have 80 patrons who have believed in what I do already. Since we started it up in August, and for them to believe, and hopefully others will join, you'll get your money's worth. I promise you that.
John, I have a sneaky goal in all this. That once we run through the 3 years of old shows, we start a new show.
Yeah, I mean, there's always.
I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, well, there's always a look back. And the guy who actually is going to help us, because we're going to be featured more on YouTube than ever before. Mm-hmm. And I think what the concept of that is going to be is that we do best ofs on YouTube. We'll have, highlights and clips from this, from our podcast, obviously. But we'll also, a few times a week, go back in the archives to 89 and 90, Mick Foley's first appearance, as Cactus Jack Manson, and Paulie, and the other crazy zany things, and the historic things that took place too. So I think we're in for a good ride. So I want you to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, because we need to get those numbers up. It's YouTube, and just look for John Arezzi's Matt Memories. John Arezzi's Matt Memories on Facebook. We have a Pro Wrestling Spotlight private group that I'd like you to join as well. And that's it on Facebook. Just look for Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast, and you'll find it there. Twitter, it's at John Arezzi. Instagram, the same thing. I'm kind of everywhere, and I'm posting a lot of interesting and historic photos from way back in the 70s recently, and I'm getting a kick seeing people respond to that. And I also posted a picture of me walking out from the dressing room in Philadelphia on January 10th, 1978, and with Vince McMahon in the background, just looking kind of disgusted, No, I didn't have I kind of Hulk Hogan or Superstar back then.
I saw that Twitter, and it's the look on your face that gets me.
I don't know. Did I look crazy?
Let's just say you weren't exuding confidence. We'll put it that way.
Right?
He looked scared shitless. That's the perfect way to put it.
I was scared shitless, man. That was a crazy night. That's on YouTube right now. If you want to check that out, just go to the John Arezzi's Matt Memories channel, and you'll be able to see it there and laugh along with everybody else. But it got over. I was shocked. I mean, it got over 50,000 impressions on Twitter, and over 250 likes, and shares and all that other stuff. So, analytics are interesting, and especially you don't know what's going to take off when you post something, and what doesn't, And that picture surprised the shit out of me when it was like people are really kind of liking this picture. It's crazy. But anyway, I think it's time to wrap up. I mean, wrestling starts in 10 minutes, I think, on Fox Sports 1. SmackDown, it's time for SmackDown. I'm sure Brock Lesnar will be on tonight, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, I want to thank Alex, our producer and editor. I want to thank my new co-host, Bob Smith. And I think we'll have a good ride. I think we're going to have fun with this.
I just want to thank everybody involved. This is a great team, guys. This is a great team. I couldn't be happier, and I'm just looking forward to every week when we get together to put a new show out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're all excited, and hopefully you'll share that excitement and tell people about us, and that will grow our numbers to where we would certainly like them to be. We'd like everyone to get a piece of the history and relive that history with us here. So I'm going to close it up for now. And patrons, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, you'll get the first podcast. And a number of other things that I'll be posting on Sunday for everybody. Until we talk again, this is John Arezzi for Pro Wrestling Spotlight on behalf of Bob and Alex. We'll see you real soon. Take care, everybody.